Well, dude, I would love to continue this little theme that we started on, because I know your fans always like to hear this stuff, is like, talk to me about your last 10 years of relationships.
Ooh.
No, I know that's tough,
Yeah.
but like lessons learned. Like let me just start off with a 30-second version. My lessons learned are find someone that you're always on the same team with. So knowing that you're together in this versus fighting someone or having to like, have your own side is a big one. And the second thing for me was therapy. Like therapy, and what got me here today in a very happy, positive relationship is Daria and I at multiple times went to a therapist and sat down and had a third party kind of analyze and help us work through some of the issues so that we could figure out how to be on the same team. But I'd love to hear, I've known you personally for a long time, so I've seen you through all types of ladies.
Oh yeah, we have mutually assured destruction on this one. If either of us go nuclear, but we've watched each other with many different relationships and trials and tribulations and learning moments, teachable moments. I would say that looking back, there are a few things that are very present for me now that may have come through some really bad decisions in the past, and also just kind of mileage, right? I mean, you start to realize better what you need over time also.
Yeah.
Polarity, number one, I would say is extremely important. And
what do you mean by polarity?
Yeah, we could spend a lot of time discussing various ways to consider polarity. But what I mean by that is, let's just say you have a sliding scale, and this is probably going to get me in all sorts of trouble. So for people listening, I don't care if you're Martian, US, Japanese, male, female, trans, in between. There are different types of polarity, and I'm going to use probably heteronormative language. So if you want to crucify me, go for it. But let's just say you have a slider that goes out this way, and right in the middle you have, not as related to an anatomy, but rather characteristics, what let's arbitrarily call like pure androgyny in the center. Okay. And then you have feminine characteristics, and let's just assume for the sake of argument that each person is going to decide for them what that means. But feminine characteristics this direction, masculine characteristics this direction. So you have sort of, and then what I have observed for myself and also in a lot of my friends is that it's sometimes very helpful to find someone who is equally far away from that middle point in the opposite direction, right? So if you have someone who is maybe hyper excessively developed in terms of masculine traits, however you want to look at that, very often they're going to pair well, from what I've seen, with someone who is as far in the opposite direction, and likewise like this, right? And there are books that discuss this. I read The Way of the Superior Man 100 years ago by David Data, which talks a lot about this. And I don't agree with everything in that book, but I do think polarity, maintaining polarity, enhancing polarity, which can be done through any number of different practices or reframes, I think is very important for maintaining a relationship where there is intense attraction and a healthy sex life, for instance, right? I think that's very important. So that's one. Two would be, and this relates to what you said, having structure for cultivating the relationship. That could come in the form of therapy. It could come in the form of having, a date night once a week, having a couple's day once a quarter, which I do with my girlfriend, where we spend a day talking very candidly about the things we like, the things we're afraid of, sort of fears, desires, boundaries, negotiating new things, testing new things, etc. And we spend an entire day doing that. It's blocked out and it's known in advance that's going to be once a quarter. We have different types of, say, systems, if you want to call it that, for cultivating the garden before it's in trouble. Does that make sense? I think that that for a long time, all was well until there was a code red and things would devolve. People wouldn't say things they needed to say. Resentment might build, and then something would explode. And then everyone is firefighting, trying to figure it out. And by that point, emotions have run so high, elbows are coming out, and and it doesn't mean both sides, but very often elbows would come out from someone, and it would just devolve very quickly. So,
how do you handle when you have these? Because everyone has disagreements and they have these little things that may rub them the wrong way when you're in a relationship.
Yeah.
And there's this balance between, taking everything personally and just, constantly responding back to your partner being like, I didn't like this, I didn't like that, I didn't like this. And then it becomes this like little nitpicky type of relationship versus, some of it you may want to just bundle up and discuss at a later point in time. Like, how do you know when something reaches a certain threshold to where you bring it up with your significant other?
Yeah. I have, and I don't mention my girlfriend's name because the internet's fucking crazy. So I like to try to protect her. You guys are both public figures, so it's part of the game, in a sense, for you guys. But in any sense, or in any case, I should say, that's why I'm referring to my girlfriend as my girlfriend. But she and I generally will batch. And I think that's in large part because I'm very sensitive. I'm a sensitive guy in a lot of ways. And I don't use sensitive. I used to view that word in a very negative light, a very negative connotation, because we think, oh, he's so sensitive, meaning he or she takes everything personally. But I had one of my closest friends, who you've met actually before, asked me maybe 2 years ago, he said, when did you know that you were really sensitive? And the question really confused me. And I'm going to get back to the relationship and timing question. What I realized is my instrumentation in certain ways is just very, very sensitive. It's almost like a scale. It just has more decimal points for certain things. Mm-hmm. And I find a lot of stimulation overwhelming. And for that reason. So at a young age, I learned how to turn that off or numb that sensitivity. But I don't want to do that in a relationship. So over time, in the last 10 years, also learned that turning off or compartmentalizing emotionally is short-term effective, long-term very destructive. Coming back to the timing question. So I'm still very sensitive to having things I might perceive as criticism or suggestions that require me to make decisions coming at me at like 3 p.m. on a weekday if I'm in the middle of some type of phone call or project or writing, whatever it might be. And there are some timing solutions to that. There are also structural solutions, right? So my girlfriend tends to work at home and I work downtown. I have a separate place that I use for work. That in and of itself solves a lot of problems. And right. And you don't have to figure it all out being within 20 feet of each other at all times. Like that is a perfectly valid answer, right? So that's one. Number two is that we will block out time. Say we'll block out 2 hours or 3 hours on a given night. I'm making this up, but let's just say once every 2 weeks where we'll do batching. And the format of that is not what we tested in the beginning, which was like, let's voice all of our complaints. But when we started with that, in other words, this like litany of charges against each other in the beginning, it poisoned the well and turned into a very unpleasant experience for both of us that we didn't look forward to, right? We kind of dreaded doing it. And my girlfriend suggested a much better format because I'm like, hey, good news takes care of itself. Let's just like tell me the bad news. But it turns out that's also pretty counterproductive in a lot of cases. So we start with what we think the other person is doing really well since the last batching session and what they're paying attention to and what we like. Then we will talk about what we think we are doing well personally as a partner, and then what we would like more of. And the phrasing's really important, right? It's not what you're fucking up. It's what I would love more of. So it's sort of positive reinforcement if we're thinking about it like dog training, right? You're trying to shape a behavior. Yeah. Instead of whacking the dog with a newspaper, you're giving a little Scooby snack to push them in the right direction when they get something approximately right. And that's the format. So we do that, and what's important to us, at least, maybe important to me, important to both of us, is we take notes. So if there are commitments that are made or important points that are brought up, we have something that we can then refer to before the next batching session, and we can see where homework wasn't done.
Yeah.
And
That sounds really powerful just to have that. I mean, I like the way that you structured that, because I could see very quickly how that could just be a negative kind of bitch fest if you don't have that structure around it.
Yeah. And I'm extremely lucky that my girlfriend's a very clean fighter. That's something I've also learned is extremely important, because the good times are the good times. But I've heard someone, I don't remember who said this, but the quote is not that adversity builds character, but adversity reveals character. And you really want to know that your partner can navigate rough emotional waters when things are difficult and not immediately pull out a gun and shoot you in the face, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very fortunate there too. That's something that Daria has taught me a lot, is that it just, where are you coming from in this discussion? Like if it's from a place of, I want us to be stronger and better together, and we are on the same team trying to solve the same problem, then it's very constructive versus it being about tearing down someone.
Yeah, there's a framework that the Conscious Leadership Group uses, Jim Detmer, Diana Chapman, and so on, that I like quite a lot. I was introduced to their book, which I think is the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, by Dustin Moskovitz, a long time ago, a couple of years ago. And they have this concept of being above the line or below the line. And I'll let people look it up if they're interested, but it's a very easy way to check in with yourself or with someone else to see how they are engaging in a conversation, or how you're engaging in a conversation, and if it's likely to go sideways or if it's more likely to be constructive. And so the phrasing they use is sort of above the line or below the line. And I have found all of these helpful. And I think in part, what I'm trying to say is that what's important is not that you use exactly someone else's system or someone else's habits, but that you think about developing and using systems or structure of some type.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, so many people out there, and I was one of these people as well, just believe that if you find the right person, everything will be fine. You know, I was always like looking for that perfect person, and it just doesn't exist. You know, like we're unique creatures. And so, you know, the second you can realize that, and then you realize, well, I do need a framework for this, you're just going to be in such a better place.